Good morning, Jamaica. Good morning, Jamaica here. And good afternoon to Jamaica, those of you in the New York area listening to me through Ari Jam. This is Jamaica Live. We are on Bridge 99. We come on every Monday. We spend 2 hours focusing on issues that we think are important for us to understand, but even more importantly for us to try and see if we can coalesce, reach some sort of consensus as to how to deal with them. And we're not short of issues that need to be dealt with. My friend Cliff Hughes, I heard him on his program and he opened this morning, he said that every Monday morning is a distressful morning for him because there's so many awful things that happen that he has to comment on. And we have the same problem here. We try to take a slightly different approach. We try to get hold of people who can help us to get a better understanding of what is going on and can perhaps guide our own thinking as to what we can do, each of us, but what we collectively, as a country, as a society, need to do. And this morning is no different. We're going to be delving into an issue that is becoming quite urgent and something that has to be, we have to focus on. So that's what we're doing today. Ever so often on this program, in dealing with the issues that we discuss, I tend to be nostalgic, to look back, to see things in the prism of what used to be. And then I find myself bemoaning and perhaps displaying frustration at what goes on today. And I'm going to be guilty of doing just that again today. When I was at school, this is a long time ago, I'm 74 years old. When I was at school, whether it was primary school or secondary school, school was like a sterile place, a disciplined place. School had to do with more than learning arithmetic and reading and writing and history and general science and all the other things that your classes were about. School is a place for behavior training, for character building. It was a place for manners, as we used to call it, as our grandparents used to call it. Don't get me wrong. Misbehavior used to go on. Quarrels and fights used to take place. When a boy dissed you, if you felt that you could manage him, certainly at the primary school I went to, you would tell him to meet you down by the coolie plum tree after school. And he would have to show up. Otherwise, the rest of the class would laugh after him. And the rest of the class would also show up under the coolie plum tree to watch the fight. It was like a George Foreman, Joe Frazier matchup. And the fight used to go on. You thump him, and him thump you back. You fall him, and then him get on top of you. It didn't usually last more than a few minutes. When the other kids saw who was delivering more blows, they would step in, part the two of you, and declare who was the winner. If you lost, you would go home with a bruised ego and maybe a bruised lip. And you would tell your parents that it happened while you were playing football. It was not a crisis then. Nobody was killed. Nobody suffered any serious injury that they had to be taken to hospital. And these fights didn't happen very often. Students at school got on very well with each other. School was a place where you made friends, not enemies. My grandchildren, for example, can't wait for the long summer holidays to end. They are so anxious to get back to school where they can be with their friends. But that is not widely the case today. It is difficult enough in our schools for them to impart knowledge, to get children to learn. Schools now face a big problem with student violence. Some of them find it necessary, and where they are able, to install metal detectors like the ones you go through at the airports to detect knives and scissors and ice picks and other implements that can be used to inflict injury. Some students, when they are packing the school bags, they put in not only the books and the geometry sets, but they also put in a tool for the purpose either of defending themselves in case somebody does them something, or for them to do somebody something. And it is not just knives and ice picks anymore. We have now seen reports where some of them are packing guns and ammunition as if they're going to war. And the gang culture that plagues so many communities across Jamaica has also infected the schools. If you come from a community that has gangs that are constantly fighting with each other, then junior gangs now start emerging in the schools. So our schools that are supposed to be sterile spaces for learning and character building are fast becoming incubators for gang violence. A youth may not get good grades in English and maths, but he may get a 1 in how to defend himself, how to terrorize the hell out of other people, how to inflict pain, injury, and even death. You know, when we look at these problems, we have to be careful that we don't overstate them. We emphasize the seriousness of it because it's important for us to become alert to what is happening and for us to see what can be done to correct it. But I certainly don't want to give the impression that every school is riddled with violence. Some are not. And we must always bear that in mind. But when you have this kind of problem taking place in our schools at the level at which it is occurring, can we then wonder why we have a crime problem that seems so impossible to fix? If some of your schools have become training centers for criminals, Lord help us. Let me share with you some numbers because that will give you an idea of how serious the problem is. I got hold of a ministry paper over the weekend which was tabled some time back. I think it was 2015 by the then Minister of Education, Reverend Ronald Thwaites. And he gave some numbers as to, he started to quantify the violence problem in school. And of course, all of these numbers are based on what was reported. I suspect that plenty of what is going on is not even reported. Some of the schools don't even, the school authorities don't even know about it. But what he reported was that for the preceding school year, and this may have been 2014, 2015, there were 1,288 reported incidents of violence in schools. This involves 915 fights. 3 students were killed. There were 160 instances where students were robbed by students. Over 1,000 weapons were seized, and that included 431 knives and 486 pairs of scissors. Apparently the boys carry knives and the girls carry scissors. Weapon of choice. During that year, 201 students were arrested by the police for acts of violence. During that year, the school authorities seized illegal drugs from 164 students. 2,361 students were warned for bad behavior, and 1,109 of them had to be placed under special watch, special monitoring, because of their inclination toward violent behavior. Now, and those figures, as I said, these figures go back to about 7 or 8 years. It probably is worse now. I wasn't able to get hold of any figures for, say, for last year or year before. But when I read those figures, I wondered, are we talking about schools, or are we talking about a correctional institution? I mean, these are the kind of things, them kind of numbers you expect to see coming out of your prisons, not your schools. What the devil is causing it? Perhaps I shouldn't ask that question, because I think we know. The general lawlessness and indiscipline that is plaguing the entire society. We see it every day. The kind of bad behavior we see on the road. The kind of bad behavior you see at some of the dance hall events and so on. We see bad behavior in the schools. The poor quality of the home environment. And when I talk about the poor quality of the home environment, I'm not talking about whether it's a nice house or a board house. I'm not talking about whether the people who live in that house are poor, or whether economically they're doing all right. There are many kids that I know who come from very poor families. They don't behave like that. They are disciplined. They're well behaved. They have good manners. They are thoughtful of others. When I grew up as a little boy in the country, next door me was a family. I'll never forget them. Father was a cultivator. The mother, well, she used to just jump around and look after the house and raise 2 chickens. But they were poor, board house. But those children were well disciplined, thoughtful. If them pick some mangoes, then bring some and offer you. But then I'm being nostalgic again. What is causing it? Lack of proper parenting. When children are having children, almost children bring up children. Parenting is serious business, It's something that, some of it is intuition, yes. But some of the skills that you require to properly bring up children come from maturity. You must have gone through life and been able to observe and to get a clear understanding of what is right and what is wrong, what is acceptable and what is not. So that when you have children, you can bring them up the right way. But when you have children having children, when you have situations where I've come across in my time some grandmothers who are not even 35 yet, and they have grandchildren. Then there's the poor examples that are being set by the adults. When kids see adults behaving aggressively, cussing bad word, always fighting, drawing knife on one another, stabbing up one another, boxing up one another. A kid grew up in a home and say, if he managed to have a father in the home, and every time the father come home, if the dinner not ready, him thump up a woman. When kids grow up in that kind of environment, then for them violence becomes a way of life. It's a way of asserting yourself. It's a way of getting what you want. Because if you're bad and shock badness, then people take advantage of you. I don't even want to spend too much time today dwelling on what is the cause of this problem. I want to spend some more time talking about What can we do about it? And what are we doing about it? And when we come back from the break, we're going to have our first guest to help us pursue that business. What do we do about these things when we come back? Welcome back. Jamaica Library on Bridge 99. Today we're talking about violence in schools. What can be done about it? What is being done about it? And I'm very pleased to welcome now my first guest for today, Mr. Samuel Smalling, who is the president of the Deans of Discipline Association. Mr. Smalling, do we have him online?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Sir Golden. How are you and your listeners?
I'm good. Welcome to the program. I want to introduce you this way.
Yes.
When I was at school, we had form teachers, no?
Yes.
And we had housemasters, and then we had a principal. When I was at school, we never have no vice principal, But our form teacher and the housemasters were the people in charge of discipline. If you mess around, them are the one who deal with you. Today, we have to dedicate a whole cadre, a whole cohort of people with the training and expertise. And those are the ones that we call deans of discipline. Is it that the problem has become so severe that we now have to dedicate a whole administrative stream to this? And then the extension of that question is, aren't we spending an enormous amount of time and effort and resources in the schools that we really ought to be devoting to helping our kids to learn? But and I'm sure that apart from the deans of discipline, I'm sure that every teacher is confronted with this problem of indiscipline and even violence. I mean, when they have to be spending so much time dealing with these behavioral issues, the learning process now get a blow?
Very good question, sir. Again, good afternoon to your listeners. And before I even start, let me just reach out in solidarity to our colleague, principal at retirement in St. Elizabeth.
Yes.
And I'm sure you're aware.
Yes, I heard about it.
What took place there. I know that there are some colleagues within the education sector who are actually there now showing support to the school community there. So let me segue into responding to your questions. Really and truly, it was, we are background, it was under former Minister of Education and present Prime Minister, Mr. Andrew Holness, that the post of Dean of Discipline actually came into this education system because, as you alluded to, in your time, which was before my time, the head teacher and the teachers within the system at that time was able to focus on teaching and learning because the level of indiscipline was far less. Because I suppose in your time, the family structure was much different from it is now. So you had the entire community that was responsible for the growth and development of a child within a community.
And one of the things that I'm anxious to do, Mr. Smalling, is to, and I sought to do it when I was introducing the subject, is to disabuse some people's mind, because some people believe that, that misbehavior have to do with poverty. I went to school with some kids that came from very poor homes, but many of them were better behaved than I was.
Yeah, I agree with you, sir. So it is based on the values and the values and attitudes that are instilled within our students, within our home, whether rich or poor or downtown or uptown. And these values the students will take to school with them. So you in terms of the landscape has changed. And in terms of teenage pregnancy, you have teenagers having children. So that also has impacted our education system, because we have mothers and fathers who don't have a clue in terms of how to raise a child, and they are the mothers and fathers whose children are coming to our space. So things have changed. The population size has changed also. In your time, possibly you had maybe 400, 600 at a school. There are schools
that is true. That is true. Yeah, go ahead. I'm just acknowledging that what you're saying is true.
So you have schools within the country now that have 2,500 students. Old Harbor High. There are several like that, close to 2,000 students. So I think the idea when our former Minister of Education and now current Prime Minister and the team, when they brought in the post of Deans of Discipline, was to sort of help our teachers to focus more on teaching and learning, and then the Deans of Discipline will sort of more focus on the safety and behavioral challenges within our system.
Tell me a little about what does a Dean of Discipline do? Is it a matter of just trying to catch the bad picnic them and discipline them, or they have to get into remedial sort of...
So the Dean of Discipline portfolio is a massive portfolio. Actually, we are responsible for safety and security of all staff and students, and we are responsible for the overall discipline of that takes place on the school compound. So we have to design behavioral modification programs for students who we engage with, who have serious behavioral challenges, whether it is challenges related to violence, whether it is related to drug abuse, whatever the situation is, whether it relates to mental health. Our responsibility is wide, and we have to be planning every day for every moment, because you don't know what is going to face you on a day when you visit the school, because it is a totally different education landscape that we face on a day-to-day basis.
Well, help us to understand. You have a boy in the school who gives trouble. He's constantly picking fight with others. Several times when he's caught, he's found with a knife. What do you do with him?
All right. Whatever is criminal in society is also criminal in school. So really and truly, in terms of when they commit incidents that is a crime in society, they are supposed to be referred to the police immediately. But with the whole child diversion, there are some schools that are different, but most schools take a zero tolerance to weapons. So once you're caught with a weapon, you are your parent is called, and your parents will come in, and the possibility lies that you can be suspended from school. These days, we based on how some of the homes are structured, if you suspend them from school, you suspend them into worse trouble. So we are looking in trying to suspend them into a controlled environment with a restorative justice system, or a community service. But
it's not only that, Mr. Smalling. You will confirm that when you send for some of them parents want to thump down the teacher.
That is also because even when there's so many stories. When you send for the parent come with an attitude that you don't have any right. I had a situation recently in my context. We found a student with a scissors and some other stuff, and the father came in a defensive mode. Instead of trying to work with the school to see how best we can help the student, the father came in a defensive mode as if he would want to take on the system. But after we engaged him and he recognized where we're going, he humbled himself and recognized that his child was in breach, and him just need to work with the school for the school to help his child. So you're right, sir. The home is a major part of the challenge we face in terms of violence, in terms of behavioral challenges that we face. It is a challenge every day for every dean, every guidance counselor, every principal, every teacher.
Give me an idea. You want a break? Can I take a break and come back? I don't want you to leave me.
Okay, sir.
Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. Today we're talking about the spate of violence in schools and, what we're doing. How are we managing? What are we doing to try to alleviate the problem? And we have online, we've been talking with Mr. Samuel Smalling, who is president of the Dean of Disciplines Association. Mr. Smalling, let me ask you this. From your vantage point as president of the association, can you give us an idea? When you get your hands on the problem, and by the problem I mean a student who has shown violent traits, and let us say that, it's not a police case where he's now subject to the justice system. But in terms of how to try to rehabilitate, for want of a better word, reform, what's your success rate, or are you beating your head against a brick wall?
Sir, I think over time, I don't know if I can give you a percentage in terms of success rate, but the truth be told, there are many success stories. Since this one is outstanding in mind from my context, I remember we got a student who was expelled from 4 different schools and came into the school that I am currently Dean of Discipline, and it came with serious challenges, and it came to a point where she was almost going to be expelled, and I engaged her, and we got her to a point where she had to make a public apology based on the act that she committed, and she was in such depression as a result of it. But 5 years later, she's a graduate from the University of Technology. She got 12 CXC when she left Crosskeys High School, and I recommended her to become a prefect, and some of my colleagues were not in agreement with me at the time. So I'm saying this, you have to find different measures to engage them based on their situation. And there are many other stories like that, similar to that, that many students who, when we engage them, we get to the bottom of it, we recognize that there are serious issues. Some of them have been abused. Some of them are, emotionally, physically, and otherwise. And so we have to find ways to engage them, to build relationship with them, refer them to guidance counsel if needs be, getting the parents to come and partner with us so that we can save them from themselves in the first instance and help them to understand that they are valued and it is possible for them to become great and become anything that they want to be. So Deans of Discipline really use our position to not only to in terms of using the strong discipline, but we also use positive discipline to help those students who their parents don't care sometimes, community don't care, so the only source of any kind of support many times is their dean, their teacher, their guidance counselor. So you have to use that. So many times, if I go on a scene and a student is involved in some activity, once I go on the scene and I call out and say, Byron, they respond. Why do they respond? You build relationship with the students that give the most trouble. And when you do that, you get to be able to help them in a greater way. There are others who will continue to put up a resistance based on their environment. They commit an act this week, next week they commit another act. So you have to be always be on your P's and your Q's, because you know that they can be triggered anytime and commit an act that the school will regret and they themselves regret. So it is not an easy task, Sir Golden, but we try our best.
What level of support are you getting from the A, parents, B, community, 3, church? Are they seeds of the problem, and are they sort of holding the hands of yourself and the other people at the school to say, now, how can we collectively bring out the weight of our own influence and presence to bear on this problem?
There are some parents that will continue to support the institution, but the truth be told, that and they are not in the majority in some of the contexts that we operate in. In some of the traditional high schools, you get more support from those parents. Within the other schools, the upgraded high schools, some of the schools that are operating particular communities, the level of support that we should be seeing from parents are not sufficient. So therefore, it impacts greater in terms of the level of indiscipline in those kinds of schools and in those kinds of communities. Our parents need to step up to the plate and be more supportive of their children, so that we can get the best out of them. So I would not say that we are getting the sufficient support from our parents in terms of overall, not only in discipline, just even care about the child in terms of how the child is performing, in terms of helping the child to see that homework is done, helping to ensure the child get to school on time. Those are things that, we see that is lacking within the system overall. So many schools will tell you that they have a late problem. And I'm suggesting that a late problem, parents must take. Why we must hold our children responsible when they're going, but our parents must take some of the responsibility in terms of the students getting up on time, getting out of the house on time, and get to their place of their school on time.
You had mentioned earlier the issue of mental disorder.
Yeah.
Do you include in what you understand to be mental disorder? Do you include personality disorders?
Yes, sir. We see that we see those kinds of disorders on a regular basis. So we have to refer to sometimes. Most times we refer them to the child guidance clinic within each area, or if the parents can afford private, we refer them to private. But we see that on a regular basis.
Does the ministry have any sort of roving psychologists who can, spend a day or two at a school and help to deal with those cases that require that kind of intervention?
The ministry have a few of those, sir, in regions, but they are not sufficient. They are not able to cover, in great detail in terms of the level of mental disorders and personality disorders that we find within our schools. They have, but they are not sufficient to cover the level of disorders and mental challenges that we see in our schools on a daily basis. There are some that are worse than some. That there are some that maybe we can't diagnose, but just by a layman you might figure that there are some that need medication and so on. But we can't diagnose, but we just refer. We refer them out so parents can take actions. And we refer to the child guidance clinic. But most time the child guidance clinic can only see that child maybe once every 2 weeks or once per month, based on the level of load that those child guidance clinic have on a regular basis. So we're in terms of human resources, not sufficient to impact the schools in the way that it ought to, sir. Go ahead, sir.
In preparing for this program today, I read a story, a report of a school in Guatemala where they had a serious problem of violence, student violence. And, they brought a whole heap of resources to bear. I believe they did it as a pilot project. I don't know to what extent they have been able to replicate it. But one of the things that they pointed out in that report was that the most important factor in dealing with it was trying to stimulate peer pressure. Let me paraphrase as I understood it. What they did was to get to a stage where the majority of the kids in the school took a position where misbehavior is old-fashioned stuff. We don't come with that in near us. And therefore, the miscreants suddenly started to feel that they were being, ostracized by their own peers because their peers were not going to tolerate that kind of behavior.
So I support that. If we can get that, we have peer counselors within schools. But those students are in the minority. But the influence of social media is just having such a great negative impact within our system also. So,
Yes.
you know, our students who are standing up for the things that are right are in the minority, and they are sometimes bullied. But it is a way to go, and I agree with the story you shared about Guatemala. If the more students we can get to stand up against the negative behavior and let other students know that that kind of behavior will not be tolerated in our environment, the better it would be. But let me segue then, sir. The Minister of Education, I was at the launch in Kingston last week where they launched no violence campaign within school, just mid, in terms of, and they had several stakeholders who signed on to it. But as I shared with them then, and I'm saying, Sir Golin, if we are going to see the level of change that we desire within our schools, it has to come from a wide cross section of stakeholders. So our busmen, our taximen, those that play music, those that are in that goes to party and have children within the party until the hours of the morning.
And they interact with the students every day.
And they interact with the students every day, sir. And those corner shops that sell our students ganja, those corner shops that sell vaping, and all of those stakeholders, our policemen, our community leaders, it has to take a wide cross section of stakeholders to reduce the scourge of violence within our society. The way our taximen drive, all of those things impact the way our children behave. And I know they ban some music, but that alone will not influence much as far as I'm concerned. It is amazing that sometimes some children's phone goes off, and what you hear on the phone as a ringtone, you are shocked.
Tell me, you mentioned social media before. What is the rule now? Are kids allowed to have cell phones in school?
Since the pandemic, sir, based on what has transpired, the pandemic and the use of cell phone has become a norm within a number of schools. There are some schools that still have a policy for no cell phones, but there are many of our schools that cell phones have become the norm within those spaces. There are still rules that govern the policy. If you bring this phone to school, you should not use this phone unless it is used for teaching and learning. But you know that
there's no way you can monitor that.
Difficult to police, very difficult to police. So it's a challenge, but it continues to be a major challenge within our system because, as you know, anything that happens, there is a cell phone, and it gets on social media. It impacts the nation.
What percentage of kids at school have cell phones? When I see them on the road at the bus stops and so on, everybody have a phone in their back pocket?
I think so. It's a high percentage, almost, I would say high 80. Very few students don't have a phone. Maybe 80% or more of most schools in the high school setting would have a phone. In the primary school, it will be much less. But in the high school, most students who come to high school would have a cell phone, sir.
So when you are trying to influence the students, you don't even know what you're competing with?
It is very difficult. The influence of social media is impacting our education system in a very negative way. And as I said, sir, since the law concerning decriminalization of ganja, drug use within the schools have increased. And if you talk to the National Council of Drug Abuse, they will tell you. So while it might be good in some sense, but the law, I think, have something within it that says about children. But we cannot police it. And when you say to the nation, it's okay for you to have your 2 ounce. Our children take it that goes for them too, and they're using it not only in their spaces in communities and at home, but it is prevalent within our schools. So this impacts behavior also.
What is your experience? A kid who, is using ganja or is found with ganja in schools, to what extent is that something that he learns from home, or is that something that his parents would be shocked to hear about?
Some parents are shocked, but it is a behavior that they learn from community and home. There are times when parents are devastated when they learn that their child is smoking or vaping, and now Molly is around. But it is a community. It is a fashion, and especially since the pandemic, children are unsupervised. It has increased drastically, sir.
Yes. Well, it's a distressing scenario that we're talking about, but I'm pleased to know that there's a focus. We just have to see what we can do to strengthen it and to put more resources behind it.
Resources, sir. We need more resources. I've been saying though, sir, I mean, some persons might disagree with me. I think we need to have a treatment center in every region for students and parents. And in this treatment center, you need to have the psychologist, you need to have the social worker, you need to have guidance counselors, you need to have sports specialists, need to have mental health specialists, you need to have reading specialists, and you need the army in there to help with some stuff in terms of physical exercise and to keep the order. For students who are uncontrollable, that we're unable to keep within the physical space within our schools, we need to have a treatment center in every region. So when you suspend a student...
In my day, they used to call it boot camp.
Boot camp, similar to boot camp, Sir Golin. So when you suspend a student from school who is in possession of a weapon, who is uncontrollable, you don't suspend him into home. You suspend him into the treatment center to be treated and then reintegrated within the school community after he has gone through his treatment. And I'm also recommending for the parents too, because there are some young parents who don't have a clue that need to be treated also to better able to manage their child or their children in terms of the kind of behavior that we are seeing within in our space.
Mr. Smalling, you clearly understand what you're dealing with, and you have helped us to understand it better. I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
I appreciate it, sir, and thank you too.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Let's take a break. Welcome back to Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. Today we're talking about violence in schools. I'm sure many of you have seen the reports, frequent reports these days, of violent incidents in schools right across the island. Not every school, but more schools than we could ever be comfortable to hear about. And we had a discussion a while ago with Mr. Samuel Smalling, who is the president of the Deans of Discipline. And we're going to be talking with, later in the program, we're going to be talking with some more resource persons to help us to understand what can be done, what is being done, how can we improve upon what is being done. Because it's a serious problem. Remember, that them kids that come out of these schools, those are you adults tomorrow. I mean, that's the society that you're talking about in another 10, 15 years' time. So it is an issue that we have to address. But, it's not enough just to talk to the resource persons who are seeking to deal with the problem. My producer took the trouble, Tamar Campbell, she took the trouble and she went and she spoke with a couple of students to get their own perspective on this issue and listen to what they have to say.
Well, firstly, I wouldn't want to be a country's national security minister, because heavy is the head that would have to wear that crown. But what is true is that indeed the crime monster, particularly in Jamaica, has evolved beyond the state's capacity to, readily and immediately curb it. And so based on the trends we're seeing and, the trends that have unfortunately permeated its way into the school system too, we have to go further than just condemning crime and violence. We have to go further than just condemning these acts within the schools, because you as we have seen, you can't condemn away the crime monster. It has no shame. You have to take a sustainable and even a practical approach at curbing crime, which eventually begins with curbing violence within the schools. Now, apart from organized gang conflict, it's obvious that the general deficit in Jamaica is where daily spontaneous conflict resolution is concerned. And so the mantle falls on the ministries of government, like in particular the Education Ministry and the Justice Ministry, to take an interconnected approach in curbing violence within the schools. Integrate into the curriculum an emphasis on conflict resolution. To the best of my knowledge, I know that there is a civics curriculum, there's a guidance and counseling, there's home and family life education. We might need to revisit these things. Are they doing enough? I think not. We probably need to make a greater emphasis at dealing with conflict resolution from the early childhood level all the way up to probably even university. When I was in high school, we had, I know Yorkcastle had it, I think Ferncourt had it, yeah man, Ferncourt had it as well. I'm not sure if it is still a popular thing among the schools, but we had safety and security ambassadors. These ambassadors, they scouted the areas in the school, they detected, upcoming conflict, and so they diffused it by working with administration long ahead of it becoming a serious issue. So equip student leaders as well with the empowerment to go out and help to fight violence within the schools and have them work with the administration, and that can be effective. But in synopsis, you reintegrate certain things into the curriculum, use civics and the other programs within the school that already exist in the school, like guidance and counseling, home and family life, to purport that message of conflict resolution, teach them practical skills from early, and then use up your student leaders like a safety and security ambassador. They are bound to help curb the violence trend within the schools.
Welcome back. We're on Bridge 99. We're on Irie Jam as well. Oh, they have left us? Yeah, they would have left us now. But it's Jamaica Live. Today we're talking about violence in schools. We're trying to get an understanding as to what can be done about it. And I'm very pleased now to welcome to the program Dr. Richard Keane, who is chairman of the Peace Management Initiative in Western Jamaica. And not a stranger to this program. I'm sure we had him on some time ago. Dr. Keane?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Golden. How you doing?
Not bad. Welcome back.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Tell me, you chair the Peace Management Initiative down in the western part of the country, no?
Yes, sir.
Now, I have some amount of understanding of what your work is, the Peace Management Initiative. But let me ask you this: you have to respond to, community violence. You have to respond to a whole range of things. Where in your efforts and in your scope, where are you able to devote the kind of sharp focus that is needed to address this problem now, which seems to be growing to alarming levels of violence in schools?
Well, when the school system started up back, we had, in fact, plans from before that to increase our attention to the counselors in the school, to give and ensure that they are proper guidance counselors in the schools, as well as to have programs within the communities where we have training for the parents, and just to teach them a few things about how they should conduct their families and how they should train their children, because we sense that there's a lack of that in many communities. The role model of the parent, in many cases, that model is lacking, And so we have been doing that pretty extensively, as much as we can, with the staffing that we have and the finances that we have.
Who do you work with, the parents or community leaders, or who?
We work with the parents and we work with the children.
Yes.
We have a program where the parents come and the children come, and they are seen by two different counselors and the social workers.
How responsive have you found the children, and how cooperative have you found the parents?
The cases that we have had to deal with are pretty good responses. The children, when they come back with the parents, there's a mutual understanding as to how we go forward in our family relationships with parents and children, and how the respect matter should be. But Sir Golan, that is like a drop in the bucket. How many families can we do, and how much more needs to be done?
Yeah, well, let's I realize that, but let's focus a minute on the sample that you're able to work with. What I'm anxious to find out is, to what extent do these students, are they prepared to acknowledge that something is wrong? That they did something that they ought not to have done? Or you see, because part of my problem is that in those young people that I come across, with many of them, if you say to them, now, why did you do something like that? They look at you with a blank stare, as if to say, well, what is wrong with that?
Yes.
They don't understand that. They don't understand what you're getting so upset about.
Yes. That is true, Sir Golan. That is true. But I think that after our time of sharing with them, that many of them have adjusted their attitude. And so I think that we are having some success where we do get these parents and these children together and share with them, So
what role is what level of support is the church providing? Has the church community taken this up as sort of an important part of its mandate? I observe when I go to certainly the evangelical churches, the ones that I've been to. One of the things that always struck me, what you call the non-traditional church. Huh? One of the things that struck me about them is the level of not just attendance, but participation of young people.
Yes.
And I said to myself, but this is amazing. And I just wonder, to what extent are the churches able to play a more effective role, a more effective kind of intervention?
I think we can, and I think we do. As you said, in some of the non-traditional churches, the evangelical churches, there's a high percentage of youth, young people and children that attend. My sampling indicates that we are about 45% of our attendees are under 18. Yeah. And so we are able to impact that group with some degree of truth and what ought to be and how life needs to be obtained and how our relationships with each other and particularly with our parents needs to be. So I think the church is having an impact on the situation. Yeah, I do.
From your experience, are there schools that don't have much of a problem, and have we taken the time to find out what it is that has enabled those schools to get away without having a serious problem of violence?
Yeah, I think a lot of that really is related to the headmaster or headmistress, as it may be, We have a situation with one sample in Montego Bay area, one of the major schools. The headmaster has taken through details and just does not. His tolerance of your dress and your mannerisms is almost zero. You don't get away with coming to school without proper uniforms, with any kind of attitude that is not socially acceptable. And so their school has very little violence in there, and a lot of good examples of proper behavior between the students and the staff. So it is possible, but I think it really starts today with the principal or that level has to be the person who is driving this kind of conduct in the school.
So are you suggesting that a zero tolerance approach is necessary? And if so, what is preventing some schools from getting down to zero?
The boldness to say we will not have it here. I think that is it. And I said to him, I said, so what do you do? He says, if a student continues to be non-compliant, we to use his word, we enable them to be transferred.
Yeah, but transfer to where? To another school?
Well, yes. Yeah,
but that is only shuffling the problem around.
It is, but at least it allows you to maintain so that one bad apple doesn't spoil your other 99.
Well, earlier on, I had on Mr. Samuel Smalley, who is the president of the Deans of Discipline Association, and he made a suggestion which I think is worthy of some real serious consideration, and that was that in each region you should have an institution appropriately staffed with the skill set that you need. You know, the psychologists, they even suggested that the JDF should be involved in providing some discipline training, that you would have this place where the school could send these kind of kids to, so that you maintain the discipline of the school.
Yes.
And those kids that just are disruptive and are quoting the game at that school, you put them to an institution where they jolly well have to conform.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know if any serious thought I don't know how you'd manage that, because if you're doing that regionally, I don't know what you do with a kid, for example, who lives in St. Elizabeth but has to find his way to Westmoreland to attend this institution. But it's something that I worry, you see, Dr. Keane, I worry for those kids who know that they must behave themselves, know that this is an opportunity for them to learn, and they cannot afford to mess up. But their own progress and their ambitions and their aspirations are being frustrated because the environment is just not conducive. Too much badness going on.
Okay.
Too much attention. The teachers have to be spending too much attention, taking away knife from people, rather than teaching them. It's not fair to them. Yeah.
And I think you also lean into the point that a lot of times, even if this discipline is insisted upon at school, when they go back into their communities, then it's a different environment, and they are required to behave differently to survive in their environment. So though you may try and raise the standard in the schools, when they go back home, if that particular standard is not also maintained in the community, and they have to go back to fighting for their rights and doing other things to survive, then you see it's counterproductive.
Yes.
Because what they do in school, when they come home, they revert to the old, and so there's a constant battle. And obviously, if put to the test in school, they'll revert to what they do at home. And so if they fight at home, when the test comes at school, despite all of the training and all of the teaching that you may give to them, what happens is that in a reflex moment, they're going to lash out, they're going to cuss, they're going to behave inappropriately. And so,
are we overstating the problem? The problem is a serious one. But I was a little worried when I started this session that I may be, scaring the hell out of people if I give the impression that, this is thing is so rampant across the island. From your experience, don't many of the schools function with a, sure, I mean, in every school you're going to have little, transgressions here and there. But don't many of the schools function in an orderly way? Level of indiscipline is almost acceptably low.
Yeah.
Or is it becoming a serious problem across several schools?
I think that the level of discipline in most schools is pretty good. What is happening is that there are just some individuals that come out of an experience, and they're the ones that are maybe creating this challenge that we're having. Because if a school has 1,000 people, 1,000 students, but 2 or 3 or 4 are causing the reputation of the school to go. You see what I'm saying? So it's not really that the 950 or 70 are not properly behaved and in uniform. It's 50, which is a percentage.
Well, I mean, and quite frankly, if I look at the numbers, I quoted some numbers earlier, that before you joined me. These are things from a ministry paper which Deacon Thwaite, when he was Minister of Education,
Yes.
tabled in Parliament. And it says, for the preceding academic year, and I think that may have been 2014, 2015, I wasn't able to get a hold of any current figures. But he said that for that year, there were 1,288 incidents reported of violence in schools. Now, we have about 1,000 schools, huh?
Yes.
Now, if you have 1,000 schools, that's like an average of 1.2 per school. Huh? There were 915 fights in 1,000 schools. That is even less than 1 fight per school. The point I'm trying to make is that maybe we have to be careful that we don't alarm ourselves. But when I hear of a student being killed by another student, as happened at Kingston Technical the other day, that I have to be forgiven if I am so off nostalgic. But when I was going to school, them kind of thing couldn't happen. Every year, student kill student.
No.
Student thump student, but you don't kill him.
Yeah. We're probably dealing with a mentality where it's no longer a box or a thump, but it's a weapon that is used rather than the hands. Because the hands would inflict a certain level of, injury. But when we start to do weapons, then that's where the fatality comes in.
Are we talking about misbehavior, or are we talking about mental disorders?
Well, I wouldn't want to use the word mental disorder, but it's far more than just misbehavior. Misbehavior is when you say something to me and me thump you and you thump me back, and then somebody can stop it. No, nobody can stop it, If you try to stop it, you may endanger your own life. So there's a mental shift in how I respond to any challenge.
Well, you see, what I'm trying to understand is that that student who it is alleged stabbed the other student, resulting in her death. When I was a little boy, Dr. Keane, anything that could land me in the police station, I stay far from it. Police station is a place I didn't want to go near.
No.
So I mean, I would have thumped him. Because I don't expect them going to take me to the police station if I give him a little thump. But to take out an ice pick.
Oh boy.
And now we're talking about students going to school, and when they search their bag, they find guns in it. Schools having to set up metal detectors like is the airport you're going to.
Yeah. Yes. Mr. Golden, is a mental shift as to how we react to each other and what our intent is. Because the intent now for any type of retaliation is not just to give a box or give a kick, it's to kill.
Yeah.
Nowadays, and Sir Golden, this thing starts a long time, you remember the other day, a couple of years ago, men started to salute each other by pointing their fingers in that fashion of a gun to each other. And they used to do it as a joke.
Yeah.
But now it has taken on a different proportion, because what you do as a joke eventually gets into your inner person, and you realize that, listen, I've developed something inside of me that tells me if a man messes me, I'll kill you.
What I haven't heard of recently, but I know there were instances in the past where, and this was the girls, they weren't so dexterous when it came to using the knife.
Mm-hmm.
But in that knapsack that they carry to school, they have a bottle of acid.
Yeah.
And that one is lethal, because when you flash that, all people who don't plan to wet up with it can get hurt.
Yes. And what has brought that on? Why would you equip yourself with that kind of a weaponry? You see? So something has happened inside where I am saying, if someone offends me in any way, I'm going to injure them to an extreme extent.
Because the person dissed you.
Yes.
And you can walk around with this, because people will laugh after you.
Right. Nobody now diss me and walk off.
Yeah. Well, continue to soldier in what you're doing, because we need every intervention now that we can get.
Yes, sir.
How are things down the west otherwise? You're still having serious crime problems down there, I see.
Sporadic. I think that most of the things that are happening are really specific to a particular group, whether it's the gangs, But in general, things are not bad down this side.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that.
The odd situations,
Glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Dr. Richard Keane, Chairman of the Peace Management Initiative for the western part of the country. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you ever so much also, Mr. Golden. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Have a good afternoon too. Bye-bye now. Good.
You want to take a break, or you want to hear something? Let's take a break now,
Good day, everyone. My name is Yaounde Jack, and I attend the Women's Trust High School for Girls. I was asked to give my 2 cents on violence in schools and offer a feasible solution for the issue. Now, given the current and most prominent news that has been circulating on social media, it is a known fact that crime and violence has now perversed our schools. However, in my opinion, we have been having this issue for decades, and though I am a bit disappointed by how long we have ignored it, I feel content knowing that now we are working to find possible solutions. I must state, however, that I have no solution at all to the issue. As a matter of fact, we can only achieve such if we work together as one nation, Jamaica. However, the very first thing we should do is acknowledge completely that it is indeed a problem. After which, given that there is no one way on how to solve crime, we can try every logical way on how to lessen it. Such being conducting frequent security checks in schools, creating campaigns as was done with the Just Medsit, campaign, right? Promoting anti-violence in schools, and by extension in Jamaica on the various social media platforms, and lastly, facilitating constructive criticism given from the distressed. All in all, we're on the right path, I think. And very soon, our vision will be a reality. Not only a reality, but the reality of Jamaica. Thank you.
A high school student, I thought the first one we played, I thought that was tertiary level student. I'm told no, he's a Woolman student. I thought it was a big people student. I didn't know it was youth and youth. But we wanted to hear their views because they live it every day, you know. They have to live in the school system. Mind you, if you're giving me somebody from the top of our school like the one you used to go to, I don't know that that's where you're going to find the problem of school violence. I think you perhaps have to go below Crossroads. Although Woolman's is actually below Crossroads, no? Yeah, but it's a different part of below Crossroads. But we wanted to get their views as well. But do we have another one? Can we? I think you said you had one more that you wanted to play.
I, Naomi Miller, a Jamaican youth and high school student, have observed over this period that there has been an increasing amount of violence in schools being highlighted in the media. Truly, I'm disheartened to say that I am not surprised of these incidents that are being unfolded to the wider population. Violent acts in schools have been taking place within our educational institutions over an extensive amount of years before these present day incidents. This issue has reached its climax in which it can no longer be avoided, hidden, concealed, or dismissed. I propose to the people and youths of Jamaica that we begin to foster an environment of transparency in which the educational institutions are encouraged to reach out to the various programs and facilities that have been established to educate and train the youths of Jamaica with proper conflict resolution strategies. In this, we are able to stray away from the fear of staining our quote-unquote perfect reputation and getting the necessary help needed to strengthen the core of Jamaica's future, which are the youths of today.
That's the voice of another high school student that Tamar Campbell, my producer, spoke with, giving us her take on the issue we're talking about today, violence in schools. We're very pleased now to be joined by two guests, and we're very happy to have both of them on together. Dr. Lucien Jones, who wears many hats. He's a medical practitioner. He's also a lay preacher. He's a counselor, and I know he's a very proud and distinguished father and grandfather. And we have as well Senator Gabriela Morris, who is president of the PNP Youth Organization. Do we have them on? Dr. Jones?
Hi, Bruce. How are you doing?
I'm good. Senator Morris?
Forgive me. Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Yeah. Senator Morris, are you there?
Good afternoon, Mr. Golding, and your guests and your listeners.
I'm glad you were able to join me. Dr. Jones and I went to school together. He was a little boy to me. But we go back so long that I call him Lucien, and him call me Bruce. When we were at school, he used to have to call me Mr. Bruce. But
or else.
or else. But Senator Morris, you just come the other day, but I'm going to take the liberty of calling you Gabriela.
That is fine.
I want to we're talking about violence in schools, and I want to put something to both of you. I didn't do sciences at school, and I certainly don't have the kind of knowledge that Lucien has about medical science, but through age and experience, my understanding is that the body has an immune system that is the first responder to ward off infection and to fight disease and to repair injury and so on. But the doctor's intervention and the pharmaceuticals that he may administer is really to aid the immune system, where it is overloaded. We're trying to deal with this problem of violence in schools. And in the discussion today, I had on Mr. Samuel Smalling, the president of the Deans of Discipline Association, and he was arguing that, you know, they are straining, they are struggling. We need more resources, we need more staff, sort of focused on discipline and the interventions that are necessary. He even suggested something that I think is worthy of some consideration, that we really need to unload the schools of these non-conforming students, indisciplined students. And he was suggesting that each of the regions, I think the Ministry of Education has several regions, should have a facility with the appropriate skill set, you know, the psychologists, the guidance counselors, he even suggested that the JDA should be involved in terms of providing discipline training and so on, in order that the schools can get on with helping the good behaving kids to learn. We spoke as well, and I had Dr. Richard Keane on from Montego Bay, and we spoke about the work that the churches are doing, the interventions that they are making, but he pointed out that they're just not able, what they do is basically a sample, a drop in the bucket. The point I want to put to both of you, aren't we forgetting the first responder, the immune system? Aren't we trying to deal with a problem that, you know, you're trying to fix the problem after the problem busts out on you? But what can we do? The immune system really ought to reside in the home, you know, in the community.
Exactly,
right?
Prime Minister, exactly, Bruce.
So is it that?
You're going in the right direction.
Is it that? And but saying that is easy. How do we get into that home now to go fix that immune system? Start with you, Lucien.
That's the difficult part, but you can't get away from the first responder. The first responder is a mother who is, and the father, hopefully, sometimes, who is responsible for bringing up a child and training the child in whatever society accepts the church will tell you about training the child up in righteousness. So I heard Betty Ann Blaine from Hear the People Cry over the weekend, and she was making the same point. The point is that you need to deal with what is happening in the home on a matter of parenting. Now, from my point of view, I may be wrong, I don't think the state can teach people how to parent properly. That's not their role, because some of those who are teaching need to be taught in the first place. So, from my point of view, and certainly from a Christian point of view, the responsibility of bringing up children and teaching parents how to parent over the years, historically in this country, has been the burden and the role of the church. Now, we can get into discussion about what has happened over the years in terms of whether church is ineffective or whether society has morphed into a different kind of society that no longer responds to or respects the church. That's a different issue. But if you look at it from first principles, which is, I'm glad that's where you started, the end game really is to get parenting done on a consistent basis, following certain well-known established rules and a certain path.
But
that's a challenge for the nation.
How do we do that? I mean, Gabriela, Lucien and I are old fogies. Give us a brighter perspective. Give us a brighter perspective.
Well, Lucien mentioned that, you know, he doesn't see and yes, let me start out by saying that I think a lot more focus has to be placed on the home, on family life, on parenting, because there's obviously a strain on teachers and other persons, you know, within the education system when these students come to school. So for me, it has to be a joint approach, not excluding any particular unit, but a joint approach. Regarding parenting specifically, I somewhat disagree. I think that the state has to play a role. I think we've reached critical levels where we can't just leave it up to parents anymore, because we've seen that even though you have in the society where a lot of children are becoming parents, and so many parents just don't know. They don't know the fundamentals of being a parent.
But Gabriela, How do you do that? You look in the yard.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, you see the 14-year-old girl start get fatter than usual. Before you know what happened, she walking up and down with child. Which is the agency of the state that is going to intervene? First of all, she shouldn't have been getting pregnant at that age.
In the first place.
How are you going to prevent that? That's the first question. And then when she does get pregnant, what do you do? I mean, when I was 14, I wasn't ready to become a father. What I doing with picnic, I wouldn't know how to manage them. But this is the experience in so many communities right across the world. How does the government intervene there? I'm trying to see if I can get a handle on that.
I think one of maybe a basic step, and this is me thinking just off the top of my head, a basic step that we could probably start to implement is having some parenting lessons starting from somebody has a child from the beginning to go to that clinic stage. Because just as how we see mothers coming in and they get the information about breastfeeding, I think it's also a good moment to teach them some other lessons about being a parent. That's probably a basic low-hanging fruit that we could start with. I don't see that happening, and so I think that's a recommendation that we could maybe look into. But it starts from that basic level, equipping them with information, and then building out programs from there.
Yes, if I may though, what kind of philosophy, for the want of a better word, would inform how you teach a parent to be a parent? Whose rules are you going to put into their head? From the United Nations? From some other advanced country? From your grandmother? Whose rules are you trying to inculcate into the minds of these young to-be parents when they go to the clinic? The nurse's own ideas? Whose ideas you're going to put in their head about parenting? What's the base? What's the foundation?
Well, there's another thing that you have to worry about. Mr. Spaulding, when I asked him, he says he estimates that about 80% of the students attending school have cell phones. You know what you're competing with there, sir? You know what influences he has in his pocket?
Spotify and YouTube and TikTok.
Yeah.
So the question I wish I want to engage Gabriela's young mind, and as I said, young and bright. Let me just say this, because I don't have any other foundation I wish to speak except apart from my Christian foundation. The reason why Jamaica was a civilized and civilized society, because we're no longer civilized. We don't care about each other anymore a lot. The reason why Jamaica was once a civilized society, where people care for one another, and where parents taught their children to care for one another, and where if a child was walking a road and did something wrong, tacitly, implicitly, the neighbor had the permission to spank that child or to discipline that child in some way or fashion. And when you got home, if you're not careful, you got another spanking. The reason why Jamaica was like that had to do with the church. There was no other institution that was teaching people how to parent. When you take that away, and it has happened over the years, what you're left with...
Who took it away? Lucien?
That's a good question, Bruce. That's a good question. That's a very good question. It raises a combination of two things. One, it has to do with the role that the church has not played. And two, the society has moved on. Just like we're moving on in lots of other things, they're moving on to things which are, to them, much more attractive and much more rational than the Papa Jesus and Master God.
Well, I don't know what the statistics are, but I mean, I've heard statistics quoted as to how many churches we have per 100,000 and so on. What I have observed myself is that a lot of the churches, the evangelicals, the Pentecostal churches that I have been to, I am surprised not just at the presence of young people, but the fact that they seem to have particular roles to play in these churches. So the question I want to ask, is it that they're singing to the same choir?
No. No. The churches are. I mean, I was at a function last night.
Why is that influence not getting into the home, Gabriela?
Well, I couldn't answer that one. As somebody who grew up in church, my church was very instrumental in the community. But I somewhat agree with Lucien when he says that the church has probably shied away from that mandate in some respect. And going back to the question that you posed originally about the ideology that would be taught in these sessions, I think that there are some basic things, though, that don't have to be hinged on Christianity or any particular religious ideology, but they relate to rearing a child, they relate to taking care of a child. I think that even these basic things are important for parents to learn. So for me, this is the crux of the matter. We spend so much time harping on the intricacies, and we haven't looked at the basic low-hanging things that we can do in the immediate sense and get them going.
Tell us what those are.
For me, I actually think those are the interventions that should be happening in the community. Social workers going door to door, talking to parents, hearing what they're doing, making suggestions, making referrals to other agencies that can provide assistance. I don't see enough of that happening. And I think that's one of the ways that we can really reach people. We see that the church is there, yes, but a lot of people aren't reaching to the churches, or the churches aren't reaching to the people.
How effective do you think that would be?
Try a new medium.
Well, I mean, I am part of a plural society. So I accept that there are many influences which are going to influence our children in today's world. I don't like it, but I accept it. So here's the thing now. I am very much in favor of whether it is social workers, however trained, or others going into the homes and trying to get parents to parent better. But for me, that's a stopgap. I'm not sure over the long period it's going to work. But I think it's something which should be tried. A better way from my point of view is for the church to reorganize itself to be much more functional in today's society. But that's not going to happen right now either. I mean, I was at a function last night where Reverend Dr. Stephen Jennings, one of the better-known pastors, Mona Baptist, wrote a book about discerning the times. And one of the things he did mention in the book is about the free village experience, and that it built into Jamaica a sense of community. Because everybody remember well that after the slaves were emancipated, they had nowhere to go, they had no money. And the Baptist church, especially in the north, and the Moravians to a certain extent in the south, stepped up and helped these newly freed slaves to own land. And owning land was, an important thing in those days, as you know, Bruce. If you had no land, you couldn't vote. And even when you had less than 10 acres, I think you couldn't vote. So all of that changed when universal suffrage came in. And together with the political part of it was the community part of it, whereby people began to relate to each other within a village and to share experiences with the church as a fulcrum and to bring up children in that context. Can we go back there? No, because time has moved on. But can we go back to a sense of community? Absolutely. And unless we do so, we are going to be just playing around and trying to stopgap here and stopgap there. I think a combination of both things need to happen.
Have we done enough, though? And I'm asking that question because I was in office for 4 years, and I cannot recall any engagement that I was in where we had focused on this. And what I'm getting to is the means of communication have changed drastically since the days when you and I, Lucien, were at school.
Mm-hmm.
How you influence people. I mean, Carib theatre used to be a big source of influence in our days. That is not so anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Have we spent enough time to see now, how do you get to these people in their homes? Because with the greatest respect, Gabriela, we're not going to be able to provide enough social workers to knock on every door, no? So have we brought in the experts to say, now, how can we use the cell phone that every one of them have? How can we reach them? How do we communicate a message to them that can have some impact on their behavior, on what they do when they go to school and how they live in the homes and in the communities. Do you know, you are on the opposition, but you are closer to government than I am. Do you know whether any of that is being done now? How to use these modern technology facilities to reach people, to influence behavior?
I'm honestly not aware of any program that is aiming to do that. But what I've seen in other jurisdictions, and my area of focus is actually communication for social and behavioral change. So one of the things that is happening across the world is a thing called mobile health, and the strategies that are used in mobile health, I think, can be applied to a situation like this. Because what is happening in a lot of our schools now, I think, is that a lot of students are disconnected from the information. They're disconnected from sources where they can converse, where they can confide. And I think that if we're able to create a sort of communication mechanism for students where they can get information on conflict resolution, where we can send messages on conflict resolution, that would be a step in the right direction. Every student has a cell phone. And if we're able to send out messages to these students daily on a weekly basis, it makes a difference. If we're able to send out TikTok messages, videos, it makes a difference because that is the language that they communicate in. So, yes, my suggestion about the social workers is a part of the solution, but the digital revolution that we need in this approach, I think it resides in us using mobile communication, and it also resides in us using the different social networks. TikTok, you see all of them on TikTok posting their videos. The same sites that we're seeing, they're on TikTok. So why not use it as a medium to spread those positive messages?
Lucien, you remember Dulcimina and Hopeful Village, don't you?
Man. Yeah, man. You're there to me, though.
Because,
yeah, man, I do.
Yeah, because, I mean, in terms of the technology that was available at that time, that was effective use of that technology. I mean, those messages used to ring out there.
Yes. No, but I agree, Gabriela. As a road safety practitioner, we all have to use the various technologies to get to people. But here's the challenge, though. You can go that route, and we have to go that route. It is just a common sense thing to do if you want to reach people. But the question is, reaching is a funny word. So in terms of how people develop and acquire values and attitudes, I am not sure that a TikTok video can ever be equal to what the influence that a mother has on her child or a father has in terms of setting an example. So yes, we need to use the technology, but I don't hold any great hope for fundamental change to take place in the minds of a young person. When you do that versus the wonderful possibility shown over the years that exemplar status can do to the mind of a child growing up.
You know, while
there's a powerful thing going up when a child is growing up and a mother equally so, and conversely, if a mother is behaving in some of the ways we have heard about, that many of those on death row have been abused by their mothers, and all of those on death row don't know the fathers. So the reverse is also powerful.
You know, while we're discussing this matter, there's a television on in the studio, and it's on CNN, and I'm watching here, not getting any sound because I'm on the program, but I'm just watching two more killed at a school shooting in St. Louis.
Commonplace story.
Commonplace. So I mean, the problem is not just a Jamaica problem.
No,
I mentioned earlier, and I'd love to get the response of both of you on this. I mentioned earlier, when I was given the topic for this program today, I did a little hunting up over the weekend. Came across a report of I think it was a pilot project. I don't know that it was something universally universally conducted. I think it was a pilot project they did in Guatemala to deal with this problem of school violence. And they went through a whole heap of things, and I can't even recall all of them. But what they were able to achieve, they got to a stage where the weapon against school violence was peer pressure. It got to a stage now where the students in that class who might have been in that school, who might have been inclined to misbehave, their own colleagues would look at them with a disapproving stare and would ostracize them if they really messed up. So that the pressure was coming not from above, but from their own peers. Now, I don't know how you get to that point, but it seems to me that perhaps is one effective way of curbing.
Yes, but the thing is that, Bruce, if I may, those students have to grow up in a home where that kind of thing, that kind of violence was frowned upon. What we have to realize in today's world, Bruce, and Gabriela, is that violence in schools is not unconnected with the 1,000 murders that are happening across the road, across Jamaica. It's not unconnected to the 487 people who died last year because of madness.
And
it's all one whole, and we have a society.
And it's not unconnected with the man who bucks up the woman because she never wash him clothes and iron it properly.
By no means. So there are many, many homes in Jamaica as we speak on the 24th day of October 2022 where the whole thing has gone astray. It's a jungle out there. The quicker we realize where we are as a people, we are no longer civilized people. We have a veneer of civilization around us. It's not there.
You ought to make me wind up the program in depression.
No, not depression. There's hope. I'm a Christian. There's always hope. Jesus saved.
I agree on that, yeah.
Yeah, there's always hope.
We need somehow, though, we need to try to gather the focus, because I worry for those teachers, who are struggling in there to teach them. I have to be spending so much time looking for knife and gun and
they're putting themselves at risk.
And put themselves at risk like the lady in the bed. And also, many of them are I speak as a family physician. Many of them have left and are planning to leave. They cannot put up with it. It's not just the money, It's the violence in the schools is right amount and the disrespect. They are planning and they're organizing to leave. So if what you worried about what happened last year, in the next 2 or 3 years, it's going to be an avalanche of people leaving the country.
If I could just touch on this point, because this is something that has been kind of perplexing me for a little while, and it's something that we also mentioned in our release. It's the standing of the various programs, the interventions that we have that are geared towards stemming violence in schools. And it's something that I've noticed with policies and programs of the state. The monitoring and evaluation component of them is lacking. So we don't know what the outcomes have been for PALS. There was a program called Inspire that was mentioned that was supposed to be targeting violence in schools. We don't know the status of that. I went and I researched and I wasn't able to find anything. So in going forward, we have to look at what we already have in place. As we try to craft a strategy around addressing the issue, we definitely have to look at what is in place, is it working, what can we get rid of, what can we tinker with to make the programs work. So that's something that I would like to see. I think it's something that we have to get on if we really want to resolve the issue.
Last word from you, Lucien.
Well, let me end with what Gabriela is saying. So in medicine, we practice something called evidence-based medicine. So what she's asking for is an audit of what has worked and what has not worked. And we throw away what has not worked and we'll continue with what has worked. I will say, going to my grave, what has worked in this country is the Christian ethic being spread up and down the entire country. Why it's not happening? The church is at fault, but so also the society. We need to find a way to bring the two together.
Well said. I can't disagree with you. I want to thank you both, Dr. Lucien Jones and Senator Gabriela Morris, both of them joining us on the discussion about violence in schools. That brings us to the end of the program. Thank you both. End of the program. We'll be back here next week, Monday, God's willing. Thanks to my producer. Thanks to my sound engineer. God bless all of you. Hope to see you next week.